Well, to get deeper into it, I'm bringing in Luke Yamaguchi, one of our resident reporters who had some time as I was running around and speaking all over the country. Luke has looked a little deeper into what we're talking about. So everybody, and I think about this, we're talking about this stuff that we're putting on our kids. If you go to the beach, you watch parents literally like every 45 minutes is just rubbing and slathering and spraying more of this stuff into their children. What is science now looking at, and what have we discovered?
Right. So it's a recent study out of the FDA that looked at 4 different chemical ingredients used in sunscreen. They recently published a randomized clinical trial using a small number of participants, 24 participants total. They split them up into 4 different groups, 6 people in each group, and they were looking at 4 different sunscreens, specifically 4 chemical ingredients used in those sunscreens. And what they were doing was they were trying to mimic what they call maximal use. So like if you were to go to the beach for the whole day, you're going to spend 8 hours at the beach, and you're going to apply the sunscreen over 75% of your body because you're wearing a swimsuit, and then you're going to reapply every 2 hours because you're following the directions on that sunscreen product. So they had these people lather up 75% of their body 4 times a day for 4 days straight, and then they took about 30 different blood samples over the course of a week. And what they were looking for was not to see whether or not these chemical ingredients were safe or not, but rather if the amount being systemically absorbed into their body was above a certain threshold or not. And that threshold was 0.5 nanograms per milliliter. And the reason for that is, according to the FDA's current guidelines in the industry, if it's below that threshold, then we just kind of assume like it's such a small amount, it's probably okay, probably not causing any major problems. But if it's above that threshold,
I just got to stop you because it's amazing once you really start investigating science, how often you hear that word assume. We just assume if it's below this 0.5 threshold, it must be safe. But you know, let's go ahead and somebody decided, let's go ahead and look and make sure we're below that 0.5, right? That was the goal of this study. So what did they find?
Precisely. And so what they found actually was for all 4 chemical ingredients, it was above, it exceeded that 0.5 threshold, which doesn't necessarily mean that these chemical ingredients are harmful. It just means that we need more study. Now, to be honest, I think we don't really know exactly what the health effects of these chemicals are at those levels. It would have been nice if the FDA had looked into this sooner because these products have been on the market for decades now. Some of the backstory is actually quite interesting as well. I looked into this. The Environmental Working Group, which is a nonprofit organization, they actually wrote a scathing criticism of the FDA for its inaction in regulating certain chemicals used in sunscreen products. This was back in 2008, and the Environmental Working Group stated, quote, "The Food and Drug Administration has failed miserably in its duty to protect the public from toxic chemicals like oxybenzone in personal care products. At the request of industry lobbyists, the agency has delayed final sunscreen safety standards for nearly 30 years. FDA issued a new draft of the standards last October under pressure from Environmental Working Group, but continues to delay finalizing them at the behest of the regulated industry," end quote.
All right, just stop right there because once again, folks, if you've watched this show, this is the type of misinformation you're being told that we're sharing on the show. And thank God, once again, it sounds like we're still live on Facebook. We haven't been censored off. We're still live on YouTube as far as I can tell. God knows how long it's going to last. And I want to make this point. You better have signed up for our website, thehighwire.com, because at whatever point they decide they don't want FDA quotes and internal documents being shared on social media to the public, then we won't be here except in places where you can find us. So please sign up right now to thehighwire.com so that we can always get you this information. But it's the same story over and over and over again. Here's the news flash. The FDA does not give a bleep about you. The CDC does not care about you. They are working for the industries. We have lost control of our regulatory agencies. They don't work for us. They work for the industries that they were created to protect us from. I have proved this over and over again. This has got to be the 100th story like this. But continue, Luke, enlighten us on how this has all worked out in favor of the industry over our own health.
Yeah, I mean, to give credit where credit is due, finally, after decades, the FDA is looking to propose. They've proposed these new regulations, and they should have them finalized by November of this year. It's kind of troubling because as early as 2008, the CDC had published some results that showed oxybenzone was problematic for a few different reasons. Maybe we can go into that, or we could skip over
go
that.
Ahead. Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So
what are the reasons in oxybenzone?
Yeah, right. So in 2008, the CDC scientists published results showing that oxybenzone readily absorbs into the body. It was present in 97% of Americans tested. It was detected in the urine of nearly every study participant. Typically, women and girls had higher levels of oxybenzone in their bodies than men and boys, likely a result of differences in the use of body care products, including sunscreens. Also in 2008, a companion study revealed that mothers with high levels of oxybenzone in their bodies were more likely to give birth to underweight baby girls. Low birth weight is a critical risk factor linked to coronary heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and other diseases in adulthood. The Environmental Working Group concluded their 2008 statement by stating, quote, FDA foot dragging has left the United States without enforceable standards for sunscreen safety and effectiveness for decades. Environmental Working Group demands that FDA finalize the latest version of its monograph on sunscreen products immediately and launch an investigation into the safety of the sunscreen ingredient oxybenzone, end quote. So that was a statement issued by the Environmental Working Group back in 2008. So here we are now, 11 years later, and it appears that finally the FDA will take action to address these concerns.
No, guess what? No, they're not. No, they're not going to take action. This will be a headline for a few days. They'll shut us up over here on the social media, and they will go around. Everyone will forget this was a story, and then we'll find out 10 more years down the road how much cancer this is already causing. Some new environmental group will finally get some new studies if they can keep from being told that they're somehow heretics of science. This is the dangerous time that we live in, and this is the power of industries over regulatory agencies. But I mean, something stood out to me when you said that it's affecting women a lot more. And I thought about the fact because, I put on a little bit of powder. I'm not used to wearing makeup, but so all these lights, I went out and I didn't want sunscreen in my makeup. Do you know how hard it is to find makeup? I didn't know this until I tried to do this on the show. Women are wearing, and they may be thinking to themselves, oh, I don't wear that much sunscreen. You're wearing sunscreen every day. Almost every makeup out there has got sunscreen in it. So just think about how much of this stuff is being absorbed. These people were in this study for, what was it, you say 6 days, 7 days? And some of the numbers were 5 times, not 0.5, but like 0.25. What was it? It was like 5 times the amount, right? I forget exactly how
in some cases, it was like 20 times above the threshold for which they were looking at.
In a few days. Right. And not to freak people out, but if you're a woman wearing makeup, you've been putting this on virtually every day for how many years? And didn't you imagine if they knew that there was a threshold? This is what I get to. If they knew that there was this 0.5 threshold that we were supposed to stay under, didn't you think studies were done of every single product on the market before it got onto the market? Didn't you think that's what safety trials were, since we have this arbitrary number that we assume you're healthy if you're under it? Didn't we assume that every product had to prove that not higher levels were being absorbed in the body and the bloodstream? Didn't you assume that was happening? Because this is the problem with science. We're all assuming we're being protected. We're all assuming that the FDA is doing these studies. And I'm telling you, just like vaccines and everything else we talk about in the show, it's not happening. All right, so we get the idea. We're absorbing this stuff in our bloodstream. Now we're going to have to try and find funding to find out how dangerous that is. And of course, you have the same tools, the same doctors at the end of the news piece saying exactly what they found out when we found out that the flu shot was causing miscarriages at 7-fold the rate when you gave them to pregnant women on CBS. They go, well, it's true, we did find this. But what did they say? Keep using the flu shot. We still recommend the flu shot, and more studies need to be done before you decide to change your behavior. And once again, as it always goes, the tools, the doctors, and the news anchors say to us, well, this though this is somewhat alarming, more studies need to be done, and until they're done, stay with business as usual. Keep slathering yourself with this stuff. That's what they do. So you can continue to listen to the news. You can listen to these mainstream pundits that puke this stuff out and tell you, even though we're telling you about this study, don't actually listen to it. But I have a question for you. You know, when we're blocking the sun. We're terrified, and I think they really got a groundswell when we started realizing we're eating away the ozone layer, and it's eating us away. My question is, you know, have you looked into the benefits of the sun? I mean, is there a danger, whether or not the product alone is dangerous to us, aren't there dangers to just simply blocking the sun out of our bodies to begin with?
Absolutely, Del. And I want to touch on that. But before that, I also wanted to offer something, an excellent resource available to people who want to choose less sunscreen products that contain less concerning ingredients. The Environmental Working Group earlier this week just released their 2019 guide to sunscreens, and that's available on their website. And they have products that they recommend that have less concerning ingredients. Interestingly, based on the existing test data, there's only 2 active ingredients, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, that are generally recognized as safe and effective. So I recommend that people check out that resource. Also, they have a similar resource called Skin Deep, which is a cosmetics database. You can plug in any personal care product you're using. I think in a previous show you mentioned you're using this shampoo and you're like, hey, what are the ingredients in this? What am I lathering over my scalp? You can throw it into their database, and they don't have every product in the world, but they have a lot of products. And then it'll give you a rating from 1 to 10 to show you how concerning the ingredients in that product are. So that's an excellent resource that people can use as well to start making conscious decisions about choosing healthier, less toxic, less concerning personal care products for themselves.
Awesome.
And then to speak to your point about, I actually read an article that discussed the health risks and benefits of sun exposure. And while it's true that the science does seem to show that there is an increased risk of some forms of skin cancer associated with sun exposure, the flip side of that, Del, is that there are even more risks associated with inadequate sun exposure, because when we put on sunscreen, we block vitamin D synthesis, and the sun is our best source of vitamin D. It's extremely difficult to get enough vitamin D from food alone. We need to be getting it from the sun. And if we have low vitamin D levels, if we have inadequate sun exposure, what that means is that we're an increased risk for a whole slew of things, including all-cause mortality, increased risk of colon cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, a whole laundry list of different things we're going to be at increased risk for. Now, that's correlation. Those are associations. We can't prove causation. But to say that I'm going to avoid the sun, I mean, I think we have to have some middle ground, some balance, right? Obviously, everyone is in agreement. We don't want to get sunburnt. That's really bad. That increases our risk for skin cancer. But we also don't want to fear the sun, be afraid of it, and eliminate it from our lives. We need some exposure to the sun in order to have sufficient vitamin D levels. Right now in America, we have like 34 to 42% of Americans have vitamin D insufficiency. So we do just need to use some common sense and, yeah, get some sun exposure, but not too much. Take care not to get sunburned. I think that's the takeaway.
I mean, isn't the takeaway really like moderation, everything in moderation? This planet's designed very well. We are designed very well. Obviously, don't go out and burn yourself. Cover up, wear hats, do things to protect yourself. Right. If you have to really get a lot of sun exposure, definitely look in those products that don't have toxic chemicals in them. That was really great information, Luke. I really appreciate it. And giving us resources to sort of investigate on our own is so helpful. Again, if you happen to miss that or said, oh, you can always rewind. This is obviously a podcast. Or just type in ICAN into your comments, and all this information will be sent directly to you, so you have that as a resource. Luke, thank you for your great reporting on this. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Always a pleasure, Del. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.